Hello, everybody who joined the call. Big thank you for joining us today. This is a discussion called Creating a User-Focused Engineering Team, a lead dev webinar in partnership with Plivo. So the webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the lead dev Slack channel to answer any more questions that you have in the Effective Teams channel. We might also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please submit those in the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them if we can towards the end. So first, let's start with some introductions. My name is Najla Al-Mashtub. I'm a senior engineering manager at Etsy. I'm based in Mexico City, and today I'll be joined by Thomas, Kainar, Rajat to share their experiences and insights. So first, let me ask each of you to introduce yourselves, starting with Thomas.
So, hi, my name is Thomas. I work for Amazon, in particular Amazon Web Services, for a bit over 10 years now. I had different roles at Amazon between engineering management and product management. And my products usually, or my team's products usually evolve around creating experience for other builders and similar job families to make their life easier to build things.
Thank you. Rajat?
Yeah, hi folks, I'm Rajat and I'm Director of Engineering at Plivo. Here I lead engineering effort for Plivo's API platform. So for the folks who don't know about Plivo, Plivo is a cloud-based communication platform, and businesses use Plivo's APIs and SDKs to integrate voice and messaging capabilities into their applications. So we basically abstract telecom complexities and simplify business communication at cloud scale. And that's what we do. Looking forward for this discussion and to learn from others' insight and share what I have with me.
And Kainar?
Yeah, hi, my name is Kainar. I'm Director of Engineering here at Pipe, and Pipe is the world's first platform for trading recurring revenue. So if you're a vendor and you have this recurring revenue, you can come to our platform, and we create an asset out of it, and then there are investors who place bids and can purchase those assets. And for a vendor, it's like they get access to this future capital. And prior to Pipe, I've been in startups for the past 9 years of my life, and yeah, that's my experience.
Awesome, thank you all. So about the panel, today, to stay competitive in tech, we know that we need to put the customer first at all times. However, a lot of engineering teams are only focused on technical aspects rather than being involved with the creation and ideation of a product, when we know that engineers have a really deep understanding of customers that we should leverage. So in this panel, we'll be hearing from engineering leaders about the ways they've transformed their engineering culture from product focused to user focused, including how their engineers influence product design, collaborate with the wider business, and keep the customer front of mind at all times. So I want to start with a broad question. I'm going to give it to Rajat. First, can you just tell us what it means to have a user-focused engineering team, and maybe give us some examples of things that teams typically focus on instead?
Okay, yeah, so I think a user-focused engineering team is a team which is aligned with business and product vision, where they clearly know what they are building, why they are building it, and how will people use it. So we also need to understand, what is the definition of user here. So it is not just your B2B or B2C users or customers. If you are working on a platform or an internal service, and you can have internal customers as well. For example, in Plivo, we have quite a few of internal central services whose users are Plivo's customer-facing products, and their uptime and scaling expectations are very high. So to answer your next question, which was about, what are things that team typically focus on in this state, I would say, so see, I would say I'm not sure, as this is very subjective and can't be generalized here. And I feel with lack of user focused insight, engineers would end up focusing on tech problems, and they would just be executing the product requirement given without developing a complete understanding of use cases and the reason behind it, basically the crux of it. So this could lead to a suboptimal choice of solutions and technology, and plus if product QAs are not aligned with the use case of product vision, then this might also lead to a poor user experience.
Cool, thank you. And by the way, I'm going to direct questions at specific people, but if you want to jump in, feel free at any time. Okay, so can you give me, Kainar, can you give me an example of how you've transformed an engineering team into being more user focused, and what are some of the benefits?
Yeah, 100%. I think like as I said, like I've been involved in this like startup worlds throughout my whole career, and what it means is that like every person in the team tends to work in all the different parts, and then like and everyone just focuses on what they're good at, and in a lot of times the technical people tend to focus on the most challenging problems that might not be user facing, right? And so it's always important to make sure that like to say, hey, why are you solving this problem? Is this the best use of our time and your time to focus on that problem right now, as we think from the customer's perspective, right? So, and yeah, and in the case of Pipe, I think what we've been doing is that we're 2.5 years old company, and for us over the first year and a half, what we've been doing is like we've been on this operating on this like building a startup mode. We have customers, we have an idea, we're building things together, like we're putting it in mid-flight, right, to make sure the product works. But and it's very much a project-based approach where you just have to ship working solutions. But as the team grows, as the company size grows, right, it's important to make sure to bring back this focus on the user, to make sure that like, hey, are we hearing feedback from the users? And the users on our side, it's like both sell side participants who are vendors, right, and buy side participants who are investors. So are we providing the right data? Are they having the best experiences? And just making sure that their voices are heard. And to do that, what we've done is actually we've created this like teams where like the whole team is focuses on the sell side, and they are building this deep knowledge around the problem, and they form opinions of how things should be done. So engineers put on these hats of product people, as well as, like they're involved not only in building the product, but also early on in like talking to customers and actually doing research and having opinions on the wireframes before we start implementing a certain feature.
And Rajat, I know you've gone through similar things yourself. Can you talk about like how a team can benefit from going through this type of transformation?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would agree to what Kainar mentioned. And to add to that, right, I mean, basically, your question was around how we can do that. So I think I can talk about my observation on how it works for us in Plivo, and wherein I see strong correlation of it in creating such teams. But yeah, it cannot be prescriptive. It is very much contextual. So talking about Plivo, I think it's very much culture driven. The product and engineering teams are to most synergistic relationship what we see, and consider the product team is the heart of the business, where engineers are the brain. So a good synergy between product and engineering team can facilitate a good user focused engineering team. So to enable that in Plivo, what we do is that we have product specific pods or team, wherein each team comprises a product manager, engineering manager, developers, QAs, and that really helps. And the regular catch ups on product vision, market scenarios, customer insights, their behavior. So that data also helps getting on the same page. And yeah, one of the things which we see and we have observed that the product and solutions are moving target. They evolve as we progress. So being on the same page, it actually helps. Otherwise, you might see some frictions because these are something wherein people might complain that we are having moving goalposts. So yeah, that's about how we can transform that. But one thing I feel is that we should also be mindful that we need to have a fine balance here when we are building a user-focused engineering team, because your entry-level engineers would be more focused on acquiring required tech muscles than they are interested in customer insight, which is fine, and we should good with it. This is a gradual process wherein they grow up in the tech ladder, and I think that's where they appreciate more user insights and adopt them into the solutions or designs. So yes, I think to strike a good balance for your expectation of a user-focused team, you need to understand these points as well, that you cannot expect everything from every engineer to adopt to. And the benefits, as you were asking about, so one of the best, I think 2 3 things which I feel are best achieved with this kind of team. One is I feel you can achieve better quality implementation with velocity, because in future you would have less iterations, less redesigns, and it optimizes on the cost and time as well. Another thing I feel is it improves on teams motivations as well, because teams are better involved and engaged by knowing what problem they are solving than just taking the requirement and writing codes. And overall, it basically improves customer experience, and it leads to a motivated, unified team, which is driven by a sense of collective ownership and purpose.
Thank you. So if we're trying to achieve all that, especially like knowing the benefits, Thomas, who are the key collaborators that we would want to work with when we're making this shift, and how do we work with them to get them on board?
Thanks for the question. That obviously depends a bit on your setup, right? We kind of established a bit earlier that, and also from my own experience, in a startup, kind of you don't really think about that, right? Like pieces fall into place, like kind of you obviously kind of have an intricate knowledge about who's good at what, and you kind of work together towards your shared goal, right? It's easier to communicate your intent and your mission kind of when you're a small team, right? But then if you are part of a larger company, and then kind of given a company of our size, for example, it very much also differs in which organization you are and kind of what your role is. You tend to find a more complex system where if you, as an engineering leader, be it as an individual contributor or a manager or a product role or designer, whatever you are, and you want to drive change, right? You need to understand your ecosystem, right? You're looking at a system, right? You're not like kind of there to do heroic actions or so, but you try to understand what kind of, ideally you do a bit of history lessons. You talk to people, understand how did, kind of, was this an accident? Was there an intent that you find the situation you're finding yourself in? What led to that decision, right? Is it still a valid decision to organize this way or to have this type of meeting or whatever it is that stands in your way to be more customer obsessed or stuff that you're doing or in particular not doing yet, right? And I think kind of doing a bit of homework before butting in is a good exercise overall. And then when you understand your ecosystem and the players in there, like what are you solving? Are you solving are you going after pain point? Right? Is there something that like kind of blocks you from doing the best that you can, or your team from the best that you can? Or are you trying to go after an opportunity that you're seeing, and then understand how you sell that, right? So what is a safe way for people to buy in? So if you want others to do or implement a change, right? What would change for them? Is this a good change for them? Is this a safe change for them, right? Can you go back? Can you frame this as an experiment? Can you frame this as an offering, as a way to make their lives better as well? I think this is basically treating your stakeholders and your environment as customers themselves, right? Which is what you're ultimately after, right? So there's a level of interaction. You're going after whatever your company's, organizations, customers are. But the people you work with are also customers, right? So they have their job to do. They have the piece to deliver. How can you help them right? And the best way to sell that is then like to share a hypothesis, like kind of, or the metric, right? So what do you expect to come out of that change is always a good thing to talk about, because more often than not, you will realize that the thing that you want to change or the metric you want to change is probably in alignment with what they want to do, right? So you might create a shared understanding on and buy-in on the thing that you want to achieve, realizing that the pushback doesn't come from the thing that you want to achieve, but maybe the approach, which then opens up a conversation about why the approach might be weird or not accepted, or we tried this, it didn't work kind of setups, right? But you don't immediately run into a wall, right? You open up your conversations to do so. If we have the time, I can kind of share this one anecdote, like from earlier in my career. So in the beginning, so I've been doing 2 startups. One of the startups was acquired by Amazon Web Services, and we built an experience for kind of the DevOps customer space in Amazon Web Services. My team, or one of my teams, was in particular responsible for the customer experience as the web interface. And at that point in time, so I'm kind of aging myself here a bit, most of the other web experiences were built in Java, while we are like kind of super modern JavaScript stack. And it was quite of a bit of a pain doing that at that point in time, but we felt strongly about doing this different and so on, and doing the best possible customer experience. And we were proven right. We got really good feedback for like the comparable snappiness at that point in time for the experience and overall like kind of how we did things. I was in complaining mode, like kind of typical grumpy German style, like then working with Americans that have a different bit of scale about what is awesome and these kind of things. So for all the folks from Eastern Europe as well, like kind of hi. So I was like, we need to do this better, like this is not good enough, and so on and so on. And I'm not sure if my manager will see that ever, but my manager at that point in time, a script level manager at that point in time, was like, please, Thomas, stop complaining and help fixing. I was like, my jaw dropped in this meeting. It's like, that's what I tried to do. And they were like, no, you're complaining. I was like, yeah, we can do this better. I was like, then how? Right? So it was a culture shift that we actually agreed on what we want to achieve here and how we want to build things and how we can scale up the building process of these interfaces and build faster and more accessible interfaces, which was a big lag with the old system. But we basically were not getting further because of that cultural communication problem, but sharing understanding that we have the same goal here and we see the same opportunity, right? And phrasing this as an opportunity help them to actually fund a project, right? And that was the first bigger career change or step change in Amazon for me, where I was then given not just a continuation of the startup that we built, but I was basically starting a new project, a new organization with a platform team that it was supposed to help other AWS teams to build a front-end experience or web experiences faster, and couple of things grew out of that. Now it's a nice large team that works on their own on this. But the trick was to understand that we have the same goal, but we approach this differently, and that unlocked a lot of good things.
Cool, and thank you for the example. It was helpful. Okay, let's say you're on the move, you're ready to do this, change things up. What are some obstacles that you might face in creating a user-focused culture for your teams? Rajat, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So possible blockers or obstacles, I think one of the things which I feel is it could be lack of inclination of motivation, because as I said, entry-level engineers sometimes don't like to know the why part of change. They aren't interested or motivated enough to know about it, and rather they try to focus on acquiring tech skills, and they want to solve tech problems more than get to know why part behind the change. Another thing is about visibility access as well. So if engineers don't have all the access to information around, and they don't have those interfaces wherein they can get it. I think that's also limit their exposure, and beyond a point they get accustomed to. So rather than complaining, they just try to build what they are asked to. Another mental blocker, what I feel is, could be a perception of delay start, wherein wherein the product manager might feel that if we engage engineers early on in the ideation, they might ask too many questions. Engineering might take time to understand them, etc. It is true, but what I feel is that it will also significantly cut down on rework and redesign, less iteration. Also, you get an opportunity to correct each other. The PM vision can be validated by engineering perception. You can build better QA strategies. And so, as I said, right, I mean, the overall cost and release velocity can be optimized. Another blocker could be hierarchical due to org design. If the product and engineering team work in silos and with an assumption that they know their job better than others and they just need to focus on that, than bringing in anybody else on board. So I think these are some possible blockers which I feel stops creating user-focused culture in the team.
If I may want to can add one thing to this, I think you talked twice about the idea that more junior developers are still like trying to learn the trade, right, and the tools and like kind of whatever fancy language or framework.
Yeah.
And might not be as interested. What I share this as an observation, but I tend to not accept this as a reality. So what I try to do is it's easier if your product can be used by the people building it, first of all, right? But that's not always a given. What I try to do is pull in engineers into customer conversations, just fly on the wall, as well as having hack days, hackathon, however you want to call these, where you pretend to be a customer, right? And just say, okay, imagine you're trading your recurring revenue, like how would you go about this, right? Like whatever your problem is or the problem you're solving is, just force them to be the customer, right? And they will be quickly very annoyed about how this works, and they will switch into, but why is this way? And as because you did it. You can change this. You're empowered to change this. If you don't like it, please say something.
One thing that we practiced at my place where I used to work is when there is a new hire, the person has to actually use the product. And we were website building company, and you actually had to purchase the builder, use the product and write out what's wrong with it and what's right with it. And you build a sense of because everyone, no matter the age, understands what's good and what's bad. But to form this relationship and empathy towards the customer is so important, as you are and to put yourself in a position like Thomas said is very important.
Yeah, I think these are enablers, and I would say yes, this may not be true in all the cases. So the key here is, as you said, the involvement, the synergy between and those opportunities wherein the engineers get chance to that visibility or they are engaged. As you said, right? I mean, you can host some hackathons and become their customers and ask them to build something like this. So yeah, opportunities and possibilities like this definitely get them motivated and be involved.
Yeah, and just to add to Rajat's point, I think it's also very important to be good communicators, right? As leaders, we are in all of these meetings. We understand, we have context around the things, but it's very important to have, as the team grows, it's very important to be clear and good communicators and give context around why certain problems need to be solved. And I think and the more knowledge is spread, the more there is transparency, right? The everyone is on the same page, and once everyone is on the same page, it's so much easier to actually come to the same conclusions and what are the right things to solve.
Yeah.
And why.
And Kainar, you actually have experience as a working in product, right? So can you elaborate on some of that a bit more? How has that helped you in instilling that product thinking with engineering teams?
Yeah, I think I've been lucky to like have, like, as I said, like to put on this many hats, and I think everyone who is working in startups gets to see it to a degree, and but in my opinion, like it helped me a lot to just empathize with customers, be it like salespeople or like, you know, like or vendors or whatnot, right? So I think for us to do it, like for me, it's about like instilling processes. How do we make sure that like through processes we can get everyone in the engineering team to be part of this, like be involved in the customer journey. And it starts with just something as simple as like problem statement, and then you think about like, okay, user stories. Then, you know, you like, as the project charter happens, to be involving engineers early on to make sure that they are also bought into the problem, right? And then as engineers start writing out their RFCs and like start thinking about the technical details of how things should be done, you know, they talk to PMs, designers, and just like they have this communication going, and it's all about having good communication. And once a feature is shipped, it's also important to do a retro and measure like through different, like, you know, like metrics, like whether it was successful or not, and then like do a retro like right after the feature was shipped and a couple of months after, like have we achieved what we were set out to achieve, and like and through those learnings just like educate engineers to be better at thinking about products and customers.
And I know, Thomas, you also were a product manager. Do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, so with the acquisition, Amazon needed to give me a contract, right? And they put something on this contract, which they called technical program manager at that point in time. And I did not really care, right? Like, I need to have a work contract. And we started working, and the rest of the startup was hired as engineers, basically. And this is what you see in larger companies, right? Like, as soon as you're out of this startup, everybody sees something. You have a job role title, right? And it might be a little bit more or less structured depending on the size or how much attention on this is in your company. But the important thing to understand is there is a expectation towards your job role, and that you don't lock yourself into it. Yeah, I said, like, I have been having different responsibilities and roles in the company, also because the feedback I've gotten was, oh, you seem to be more interested in this product stuff than also the engineering thing. Okay, don't you want to be a PM again? I'm like, sure. Right, and I was a PM, and I had a lot of like kind of, wait, but this is how we want to implement this? And then like, they make me engineer manager again, right? So I'm bouncing in this company. I think the important part is to still understand the expectations, but focus on the things that you bring in addition, and not so much the like perceived like gaps. And share and talk to your manager, whoever kind of needs to understand your position in a way that says, like, kind of, this is what I bring to the table. And I think the interesting piece is here that if you have a product background and are an engineering leader, it's similar to having a history in marketing, in UX design, and becoming an engineering leader. What you have is a superpower. You have a set of skills, you have a set of context, and an acquired language in that domain that sets you apart from your peers, other engineering leaders. right? So it will be easier for you to talk to the marketing folks. It will be easier to you to use the language that designers in your company speak, whether they're reporting to you or are in a central function organization, whatever you do. This will allow you to drive change and be more customer obsessed, and being an advocate for this job family, this department, whoever it is. And it's a superpower that sometimes people forget about, because they try to be the best self in this new role and try to be like their peers, and sometimes forget about what the difference they bring is a valuable difference. So, like, to quote my mother, she was really happy that I now have my first real job. For the first half year in Amazon, I didn't even know what I'm doing and what technical program manager means or product manager means. And then I at some point went to the wiki and read up on what this means, and I'm not doing half of this, but nobody was complaining. I then checked in whether it's fine or not, and people was like, "Yeah, it's fine. Do what's right," which is, I think, the message there. Don't try to be like the others, as a default, and remember, where you came from and what might help, this history, and what might help you to do something more different than others, and how that can contribute in the end, the customer.
Thank you. For the last, I'm going to do one more question, then there's a question in the Q&A we can get to. So just to touch on company culture, how can company culture help or hurt with user-focused teams? And we can start with Rajat, who works at a smaller company, and then maybe touch on what it means at a bigger company like Amazon.
Sure. I think I would be talking about the same thing what I mentioned as part of how we can create user-focused engineering team, and I can take Plivo's example. So I can talk about my observations here. Like as I said, right, to create better synergies in Plivo, we have product-specific pods, and so these small teams actually own the entire product. They drive it, they execute everything, they take customer escalations, etc. So the success, the challenges, and everything is owned by one team. So more often than not, they try to brainstorm. They do regular catch-ups on engineering side challenges, product side challenges, etc. So they are on the same page, and which basically motivates them and align. So that is something which really helps, and I think in a small team, things are easy to synergize between. So yeah, like that culture really helps in driving these objectives.
Cool. So Amazon. So as mentioned, going from a startup to a company like that, I, pardon my French, was scared shitless. We were 5 people, and suddenly I joined a company. When I checked on Wikipedia, Amazon at that point in time was 100,000 plus employees. I felt this is unfathomable big. How do we work in this new setup? And what I was understanding pretty quickly is that the Amazon culture very much aligned with our former setup and way of working, which is also one of the reasons why Amazon decided to buy us, that there was a good cultural fit, which is basically driving autonomous decisions and move as fast as you can, basically, in to do the right things for your customer. Amazon achieves this by through culture and what we call the Amazon leadership principles. So there's 16 of that. You can find them on Amazon.jobs website, and then there is a leadership principles. They're all explained and listed, and they range. Right, so it starts with customer obsession and then goes through. And the interesting thing is, if you look at them closely, right, not just behind the headline, but if you read the little paragraph, you understand that there's friction, right? I think that's something that is surprising to people because there is inherent conflict or friction in these. Bias for action, insist on the highest standards. Right, like kind of can move fast, do stuff now, but do you do it well enough? Right? Is this the right way to do it? Is this like scalable and sustainable as a decision? Right? So you can set these leadership principles in contrast to each other, which is the whole trick. Right? So there is no truth. Right? There is no the best kind of customer obsessed solution is obviously the winning one, because every of these leadership principles driven to an extreme falls apart and actually is hurting. Customer obsession at scale means, for example, that you're not necessarily doing everything any customer asks, right? Just because you talk to one customer and the customer says, I want this feature, right? You have the opportunity cost that prevents you from like doing the right thing for a larger set of customers, and or this additional feature actually creates complexity and confusion and an extra step for a large set of customers, right? So this is not like kind of any of these to the extreme is not right. So the trick here really is that this is a framework that is provided to Amazonians so they can make decisions because they have this shared like kind of little set of like things to think about. And then in the discussion, kind of way off, like kind of this versus that, how much here, how much there, to then come to their own right decision because they were given the same shared language to do so. And that is important because as there's a lot of change, right? And company of the size growing, but also basically through new people and also attrition, you need to keep somehow this message alive. Right? We talked about before, kind of if a team is aligned, it's easier. But how do you align an organization that is growing that fast with kind of all of these different things, right? Like the trick is to give them a tool to be independent as possible. And there's a bunch of other tools at Amazon that help you do so that I will potentially go into if somebody has questions and allow the next question.
I wanted to add a little on this point as well, because I think like coming from a perspective of startups, right? The engineering culture is built just by the early engineers, and you just like whoever you hire, right? Like we hired our friends and the coworkers that we worked with, and like we have our own shared culture, and it's not intentional early on, but as the team scales, it's like unless you make it intentional, unless you put it in words and you think through them, like the culture will be changing and it will be different as the new engineer joins. And then if it's not if it's not the same across the board, then, there will be these patches of islands that, have different way of thinking around the product and customers and everything. So for us, it was important as we were scaling to be intentional about it and to make sure that we put in words what we think are the most important values. So we have like our values that it's 7 values that we deeply care about. And it's not just like, hey, like we have these values and they're there, like they live on their own and we never look at them again. But it's actually like we actually refer to them every week. We have meetings where like half of the meet, like where we catch up with the engineering team and we're like, hey, how's everyone doing? Are there any blockers? Is like, can someone help out and whatnot? But before this, and it's called Kaizen because we're constantly trying to improve ourselves. But the first portion of the call, what we do is actually like we just call out and shout out people who for like specific, like values, be it like shipping faster sustainably or focusing on impact. We're just like, hey, I'm shouting out Rajat for focusing on impact and shipping this feature. Like that was so important for us. And like I'm shouting out, like Thomas for, for focusing on craftsmanship and, like building such an amazing, tool for everyone in the team to use and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think just to add one more thing here.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a quick one. So one of the things when we were talking about culture got reminded to me was we also like at Plivo. One of the things what I see also helps us build that visibility on company's objective is when we drive our roadmaps and priorities through OKRs. So this is what we do, and so in this case, the team which has roadmap goals at their individual goals, their team's goals, they understand that how they are attached to each other, and what drives business is what drives their goal eventually. So I think that is another thing which really helps building that insight which an engineer needs in the business.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all for your answers to all those questions. I know I said we were going to take the one in the Q&A, but we're out of time, so we'll answer that in the lead dev Slack. The Slack channel is called Effective Teams, Effective-Teams. So please head over there to continue the discussion. And thank you to all of our panelists today. Thanks everyone for joining. And we hope to see you next time.